Hello, everybody. This is Monica Paolini from Senza Fili, and it's a pleasure to be here. Um, I just want to make sure that we have time to get everybody on. I just allow people in. So, a few housekeeping notes, and then we will jump into our sparring partners for today. Um, it's always a pleasure to be here. I greatly enjoy doing Sparring Partners, but this one is somewhat special in the sense that we're going to talk about an issue that I've been talking a lot of Sparring Partner recently, but from a different perspective. So for those of you that are used to Sparring Partners, we usually talk about things in somewhat of a different way. This time we're actually looking at AI from a different perspective, which is the human perspective. And so we're not so much focusing on what AI can do to us, but what is that we can do to get AI successful, and how is that going to change the way we operate? And that's often something that I think it's a crucial question, but it's a question that it's easy to forget to talk about or to leave on the on the back burner because we're still trying to understand what is that AI can deliver to us. But the two issues, what AI can do for us and what we can do for AI to succeed, are really one and the same question. Anyway, so few housekeeping notes, and those of you who've been on Sparring Partners before notice, there is no Q&A at the end, but we do want to hear your opinions, your comments, your questions. So please go ahead and send questions to us or comments through the Q&A or through the chat, whatever works better for you. Make sure you are considerate and respectful because everybody can see what you type. So no anonymous content. We will take the questions as we go along. And we try to make them fit in the flow of the conversation. If it's a topic that we have not started, we'll go for it if it's relevant. One thing that I would say is that today we're going to talk about the human role in AI with respect to telecoms. So there are a lot of issues in terms of, what AI is going to do to society at large, to the economy, and, those are excellent and very important questions, or the existential risk of AI. Cool. We're not going to talk about them today. We're going to try to focus on what happens in telecoms. What else? I think that this is we're ready to go. Again, please do ask your questions. The sooner you ask your questions, the more likely it is that we will answer it. So don't wait until the end. Just go ahead and do it. As said that, I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will go with the discussion. Now, I am honored to have today with me Paul Patras and Azita Arvani. Paul is the CEO of NetAI and associate professor at University of Edinburgh, and is going to bring the research and startup perspective. Azita Arvani is the former CEO of Rakuten Symphony North America and a board member in startups. So, no, actually, not just startups, to big companies as well. And so she's going to bring the perspective of the operator. She used to be at Nokia, so the big vendor perspective as well, and the other vendor perspective as well. So we have everything, sort of the whole ecosystem in a way represented here today. So, and they're both extremely knowledgeable about AI and telecoms as well. So that's a great pleasure. So let me first ask to introduce themselves. So Paul, why don't you go first? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thanks very much for the invitation once again, Monica. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with you and Azita. I'm also looking forward to any interesting questions from the audience. So you already introduced me without sort of keeping things overly lengthy. I run NetAI, which is actually a spin-out from Edinburgh University, where I still have a faculty position. We're a network intelligence company specializing in software that provides real-time and predictive insights into mobile network usage and performance, which helps operators reduce their expenditure and generate new revenue streams. I'm going to paste the link here to the company website in case anybody is interested in what we do and wants to find out more. But today is not about NetAI, it's about bigger challenges, which together as a community we should probably look at.
Excellent. Azita, how about you?
Hi, Monica. It's really great to be here with you and Paul in this very creative format. I really like it. As you mentioned, I'm the former CEO of Rakuten Symphony North America. And within Rakuten Symphony, what we did, we really deployed and did a network that was Open RAN, cloud native, and with end-to-end automation that ended up being very intelligent with much reduced cost. And I also serve on board of public companies, as you mentioned. And I've had the privilege of working with both nimble startups as well as Fortune 500 companies like Microsoft, Nokia, and Docomo. And what I have been focusing on in the last few years has been really a big focus on the intersection of AI and telecom and how AI can really revolutionize and sort of bring this digital transformation that we've been talking about, because AI is not just an enabler, but also a force multiplier as well. And the discussion today, I'm especially interested in because it really talks about the interaction between the humans and AI and how that can be improved in the domain of telecom.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I have to say that from a personal point of view, the reason why I'm particularly interested in this is because I got into telecoms not through engineering and computer science, but through neuroscience AI to start with. But before that, I was philosophy of science student. And so what I was looking, it was more how AI actually, to understand humans through AI rather than the other way around. So to me, it's kind of a natural thing to look at, and this is sort of the background from on a personal level. It's like you understand how important humans are in when you have a model, how you train it, how what kind of data you use, and that's the kind of thing that is kind of before and after AI or around AI. So and this is also part of a report. I'm going to send you the links to the Sparring Partners that we did, and the report will come up at the end of the month. So let's get started here, and let's talk about. Okay, so we already have a question, but we're going to hold on to that for a second now. Okay, let's start, and maybe you can just give us sort of a high-level introduction of how do you see the role of humans in AI, in telecoms, and then we can move on. Azita, why don't you get started on that?
Yeah, so if you look at sort of the whole process of how you introduce AI to any domain, but in particular, like let's say the telecom domain, you have a lot of data collection, right? So you first of all, you kind of pick the areas of priority for your company, and I believe that should really come from the top and have a holistic view. But let's say you've done that piece and you pick the area that you want to work on, and then of course humans have a lot to do with collecting this data, labeling the data, curating the data, and maybe even augmenting the data. Let's say you're trying to do anomaly detection, and there are some anomalies that usually don't show up and it's not in your data, so you want to add those in there as well. So a lot of things to do with the data itself and the feature engineering, right? Picking up the features that are important for telecom domain, right? Whether it be like packet loss, or in the case of you're looking at the network, the signal strength, and In the case of customer, for example, you want to look at the usage pattern, the duration of the call, etc. And so a lot to do with data and cleaning the data, making that data feature selection. Then with the model selection itself, it's super important. I mean, we are all excited about GenAI, and of course, that's awesome. But there's also many other kinds of AI that we have been using in telecom, and it'll continue to be a great workhorse for us. And so picking the right model and then doing a lot of trials and experimentation with that, because one thing that I don't think we talk enough about is the cost versus performance, right? So because we all want great performance, but it all comes at a cost. So being able to do the trials and make sure that we pick the model and the kind of training or fine tuning and alignment that gives us the right kind of optimization for the objective we want and the budget that we have. So I'm going to just stop there because I'm sure there's others that potentially Paul might want to go into.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, that's actually it's a good way of starting it. There's a bunch of other things I would probably add here. So selecting a model is one, but given the unique characteristics of a network deployment, be it mobile or broadband, there is great scope for actually designing from the ground up neural models that capture those specifics of a deployment and learn some special abstract features that are unique to mobile networks. And then whatever the task at hand is, again, the model can be tailored for that. The way the model is trained to solve that task is another thing where actually the human element is quite important, deciding what sort of, for instance, a loss function to use to train a model and so on. And then there's elements to do with model life cycle. So how do you continuously train, test a model when there are changes in your deployment, in the distribution of your data? How do you go about maintaining the sort of the accuracy and the performance of a neural model that has been already deployed? So those are a bunch of other things I would add.
Yeah, and I guess that, oftentimes we think about AI as something you just inject. You just get a model off the shelf, you put it in, you plug it in, and and clearly, this is, I'm not saying that there are no good models. Yes, there are, but you need to, I mean, I guess that's true of any solution, but with AI more particularly so, you need to make sure, as you were saying, that you have the right data to start. You train the model, you customize the model the right way, and then you test it to make sure that it fits your goals, because it's often a trade-off. It's not like it works or it doesn't. It's like depends on what is that you're trying to achieve. So maybe we can start sort of like from the data all the way to the testing to see, what is that can go wrong, what is that we should be thinking about. Do you wanna, who wants to go?
Yeah, so if I may start with, again, I'll go back to the cost, because cost is super important, right? Right. So if you look at, for example, with GenAI, there's a cost for number of tokens that come in as input. There's a cost for the number of tokens that get generated as output. So it's important that when we bring GenAI to solve a problem, we are very conscious of this. And let's say you want to have, I don't know, ChatGPT-4 doing all this. So that could be very expensive. But there are ways that you could reduce that by reducing, sort of tightening up the prompt that you put into that GenAI, and then also the way that you reduce the output that comes out. So potentially you could maybe take the input and take the noise out of it using cheaper models, and then have that straight and narrow type of a prompt going to a more expensive model. So you could really use a lot of different ways of hybrid ways of working with the models in order to reduce the cost drastically. You could change the model that you're using. Maybe you don't need to use the most, the biggest parameter model. You could use a smaller model, or you could use it in combinations. Or you can play with the token size as well. So I would say that that's one area that you could definitely work on. The other area is this notion of customizing the model for the domain. And the two big ways is fine tuning and retrieval augmented generation. And I think that most people think potentially RAG is easier. You just add a bunch of files that people can look at, that the model can look at first before generating its response. But fine tuning should not be forgotten, because especially in telecom, you have a lot of data that you could bring in, and you could potentially use that to fine tune a pre-trained model to make it more telco specific. And again, if you need to bring in some real-time information, you could add RAG at the end, because RAG adds to the number of tokens, which means it becomes more expensive by nature, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, this is, I mean, cost is very important, but also it's important because it's basically, it involves all sorts of trade-offs, because you can throw a lot of money at any problem, but at some point the return on that investment kind of goes down. And so I guess that, with these models, the question is that, what do you do in terms of cost benefit? What's the cost benefit analysis here? Do you want to be using, basically redeveloping a model, build it from scratch, like some operators are planning to do, apparently, or modify and customize and make telco specific what already is available out there. And that's where I think that, the human element comes in, because you can go both ways. The cost is different, the complexity is different, the compute requirements are different, and what you're going to achieve is different. And so if I can go to one of the questions we have here, which is a question for Azita, but it's, what's your guess on the percentage reduction in OPEX and CAPEX if AI were to be fully adopted by operators? And I think that's a good question that doesn't have an answer. And it's important. It's an important question to ask, but it's very hard, because the percentage reduction, first of all, depends on what is your current efficiency, but also it really depends on how you want to go about it and what is that you're trying to do. So just the cost reduction is important, but it's not necessarily, I don't know, how you define it and how you want to go, how aggressive you want to be. It's a strategic choice to some extent. I don't know.
Maybe I can chip in
go
there.
ahead.
I know the question wasn't for me, but I think we should probably first look at, okay, what is the use case we try to address with AI, right? Because there are so many facets to a network. So yeah, perhaps, let's take a simple example. You're looking at reducing the energy consumption of your radio access network, and you're using some AI to do some prediction and drive down some allocation of resources, which makes perfect sense. And for instance, we're looking at some of that. So the margins there are probably bigger versus other situations, but there is also a cost. So you need to train a model. You wouldn't train continuously a model, so then the question is, do you need the right compute infrastructure to train that model, or are you happy to train that in a public cloud and accept the fact that you will have to move data from your deployment outside that? And I think there's different perspectives here. Some people are skeptical. There's regulatory constraints, but oftentimes it's viable and it's quicker, and also doesn't involve acquiring a super expensive piece of hardware to train that model for a limited period of time. But there is a cost. So now the question is, okay, And then again, depends on like what's the size of your deployment. And it's a numbers game. So the bigger the deployment, in my opinion, the more energy you can save. And then, okay, the bigger, the more models you need to train, and then there's a cost. But I think, savings come with the size. So if you're having a very small operation with just hundreds of cells and you want to do some optimization, the saving margins will be pretty low. And especially now, if you need to use some GPUs to train a model, that's a cost as well. So I think, we should probably be a bit more specific, and yeah, because otherwise I think it's very hard to put the finger on a very fixed number in terms of how much can be saved. But it's a legitimate question.
Yeah, just to kind of put a little more perspective on it, telcos on average have 69% of the revenue is OpEx, right? So some operators are more efficient than that, but if you think of that 69%, that's further ground for using AI to reduce that, whether it be with energy reduction and efficiency, like Paul was mentioning, or with reducing your workforce or making them more productive. Those are all the kind of things that can be done. Now, we are talking right now mostly about things that are existing today, which is, using them for problems that we know about. But if you think about this notion of agentic AI and having AI agents actually being part of your workforce, that's even a much bigger savings that could potentially come to us in telcos.
No, absolutely. And that actually brings a different issue. We have a lot of things that we could be talking about today, but the issue of talent, the quality of work, and all that. So initially, the issue of AI and automation was like the reaction that we get from operators and everybody's like, oh my god, and we well, it's good because we can have less people working, so reduce the cost, but that means firing people. Now it seems like the discussion has been shifted a bit because we're actually having trouble finding the right talent for all of this type of new approach. And so because we don't have enough people to go around, even if costs were not an issue, which it is, we cannot possibly just hire people that don't exist. And also because the network is more complex, you need automation just to do things as the way we used to do before when there was less complexity. So we needed to manage complexity. And so having a more sort of a different workforce. But also that means that people get to do more interesting work because they don't have to do the menial task of kind of like, making sure everything works and just fixing it, which is kind of a boring task. So how do you see the two things going together? And yeah, actually, maybe that might be sort of related to the question of that we have from Kapura for Paul, with is how our users have not been reacting so far, which I guess is like, so what is that you guys are hearing from people deploying this in terms of their workforce situation?
Yeah, so I guess this too, I guess it's a valid point, and it depends on who you talk to. And oftentimes what we need to explain to people is that AI is not here to kind of kill jobs. It almost feels like when the Industrial Revolution happened, everybody thought, oh, all the machines will do everything and we will not have anything to do. It's more about, let's take, say, anomaly detection or prediction as a use case. Instead of having somebody monitoring a dashboard 24/7, you can have some degree of automation whereby you use AI to identify those suspicious events and filter them, and only bring the ones that actually are critical to the attention of a human operator, and for the rest of the time allow that person to focus on, as you say correctly, Monica, focus on more sort of interesting tasks and tasks that actually require deeper sector knowledge, which so far maybe an AI doesn't possess. But then there is also the other side of that coin, which is the skills, right? So traditionally, I think that there's been a bit of a sort of a disconnect between the telco and mobile networking community and the pure machine learning AI community. And I remember in the early days, there was quite a bit of skepticism in terms of bringing AI into networking. And now things are changing a little bit. And in the end, it's a matter of like having the right mindset and understanding, hey, this is another tool that can help me solve some problems, which I could solve anyway with some traditional tools that I have already, but I can do it much faster and have more efficient operations and have better employee satisfaction, which I think is quite important.
Absolutely, yeah. The question is that who is going to do it? Are the people that we currently have right? Because I mean, I don't know. I'm not running operations as an analyst, but you have to learn to do things in a different way if you want to use AI. So you need to have different skills and different. So Azita, how did it work? And how did you work at it? And which is actually a question like, it seems that reskilling existing workforce is key for AI initiatives. And at Rakuten, you kind of didn't have that problem in a sense because it was new. In a greenfield developer, you have an advantage, but it's still not true because you still want to hire people with experience. And the people that have experience are not necessarily the people that know about AI. So how do you?
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's kind of similar to when we went to a cloud native architecture, and that's the trend that operators are going through. So you want people that understand cloud, and you want people who have domain knowledge. And you don't necessarily get the two of them together in everyone, but you bring them together and make them collaborate because. And we saw that in cloud, is that people that know cloud, they think, oh, telco is just another industry. We'll just apply cloud to this industry. What's the difference? And same thing on the other side is like, what's the big deal with the cloud? We can learn it. But it turns out that you need experience in both areas. A similar thing is with AI here, right? You need data scientists, ML engineers, AI engineers that understand that field. And telecom is not just another industry. I feel like telcos, healthcare, financials, it's very sort of complex industry, regulated and all that. So you need to have domain expertise there. So the best thing is to really bring the experts from one domain, experts from the other domain coming and collaborating together to understand and have appreciation for what the other part is bringing at the same time that you're upskilling your telecom expert, because at some point you need to run all of this based, maybe at the beginning you hire or you partner with others to help you with getting your AI off the ground, but at some point you need to be able to manage this all on your own. And so you're upskilling your people with AI and ML knowledge, data science, etc. You have some in-house people, but you also augment them with more experts from outside during the time that you're deploying this, and at various intervals in the future to make sure it keeps updating and maintaining and getting better.
Yeah, and it's actually, this was something that we talked in previous Sparring Partners. And so there is a need clearly to have two types of expertise, which is network expertise, AI expertise, or data expertise. And the question is that they're not always in the same person. Ideally, you want to have somebody that has all of them, but we're not quite there. And so the question is that from a cultural level, how do you get them together? And that's actually an issue, not just for the operators, it's an issue for the vendors as well, because they have to do that. And I guess even a university, in an educational setting where you have new people, but if you have a PhD student, it's not necessarily going to be doing everything. So how do we deal with that? Because and what I hear is that sometimes you have the RF guy that says, yeah, oh, that's the way we always used to do it, but then the AI would say, well, we have a new recommendation which doesn't really go in line, and it could be a good one or it could be a bad one. it could go either way, but there is a risk of the two they don't necessarily work well together because everybody wants to defend its own thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think governments throughout sort of recognize there is a skill gap, and this is not necessarily just telecom specific, but as Azita pointed out, this also refers to other fields like healthcare or finance. So you do start to see increasingly more sort of interdisciplinary postgraduate research programs where you have PhDs being trained in applications of AI to a specific sector. That pipeline is in the early days, but then there will be a question at the end of that journey, which is how do you make working in telco sexy again? Because, and we talked about this in the past with other people, young generations now have other types of, let's say, technical heroes which are outside the telecoms domain. And, you know, networking has been sort of increasingly being perceived as sort of a utility, right? So how do you kind of, you know, convince people that actually there is a lot of exciting work and there's a lot of challenges? I mean, we see thousands of new applications being launched every year. We are looking at, you know, 20% year-to-year increase in mobile traffic. There's complexity. There are so many interesting aspects to consider, and then to be able to kind of keep these complex systems, networks of networks, working in an efficient and profitable way is hard. So presenting that, you know, from the perspective of, let's say, whoever runs a network to the young generation, I think it will play an important part.
Now, I have to say this. Maybe we should pay people more.
That's another one, yeah.
I mean,
but
you know,
intrinsically, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You know, pay and compensation and all that is aside, but intrinsically, and I had a talk at MIT Media Lab a few weeks ago, and I brought this point that what is AI's third pillar? It's networking. You know, to me, it's so important that, you know, data is the new oil. The compute is the currency of the future. Great, I totally agree on those. But networking to me is the third pillar of AI. And as such, you know, what's more important than bringing compute and data together? You know, it's the networking that brings together. And even if you look at NVIDIA, one of the most productive acquisitions that they made was with Mellanox, which was about networking of compute and data together. So in terms of cachet and prestige, intrinsically, there's a value in networking. Now, how you brand it and make it more sexy, like you said, Paul, I'll leave it to others to work on that.
But you're actually absolutely right, because, you know, when you look at, you know, what's going on in AI, you know, like the kind of the basis of it is actually old stuff. I mean, a lot of the AI and ML algorithms have been there forever. What is new now is that we have a lot of compute power that is more accessible. You know, I used to remember where you had to book time on the supercomputer kind of thing to run things. We're not there. But also we have the connectivity part, the network part, and the data part. Without that, it would be, I wouldn't say useless, but there would be no real use. I mean, the use cases would be much more limited. Now you can just have everything could run. I mean, everything will use AI, but truly it is because, as you say, we have a network. If we didn't have,
we have a network, and you have these edge clouds that you could then have data and compute to come together in much more flexible ways, right? Instead of always having it in central cloud, you could have it at the private edge, at the private network, making sure even the sensitive data never leaves there. You could have it at the far edge, you could have it at the near edge. So these are all the possibilities for data and compute to come together that makes the sort of next generation AI for telecom and for enterprises that telcos support, much more flexible, gives them more degrees of latitude, and something that could be very useful in terms of latency, privacy, security, all kinds of benefits.
Yeah, and well, actually, so I've tried to make this kind of a simplified version of this argument to people in college that are looking for jobs, and like, you really should work in telecoms, is really sexy and really exciting. I think it's really exciting, but but I really had a hard time actually convincing them, because like, we want to, the sort of the attractiveness of going to work for like a hyperscaler, or the different companies are obviously there. Paul, since you work at university, do you think that the educational institutions are doing enough? And I have to say that I spent enough time in the UK, and it seems like there is a lot of like also government efforts to promote that. Do you think we're going the right direction? And then maybe Azita, you can comment about you see some other places.
Yeah, I mean, what the government is doing here, I mean, it's recently funded a number of doctoral training centers in AI and in multiple facets of AI. So for instance, Edinburgh is running a CDT in machine learning systems. So how do you actually build compute systems that run AI models efficiently? If you want to train a massive, let's say, large language model, do you really need huge compute power? Can you do that in a much more cost-effective way? So there's questions like that to be answered. There's people working in bioinformatics and applications of AI to drug discovery, a bunch of other things. So the government has done quite a bit of investment. There's another thing that they recognized, which is to be able to stay ahead of the curve with developments in AI. You also need the right infrastructure. So there's been investment in high performance compute clusters, supercomputers that are being rolled out right now. So I think in the end, you need multiple parties to come together, and that includes government, private sector, and universities. And some of the stuff that is happening to these doctoral training centers is exactly that.
Absolutely. Azita, what do you think? Do you think US is doing enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think we, as part of telecom industry, we really have to take the responsibility to push this, because we need this young blood to come in and bring innovation into telcos and telco ecosystem. So and that's why I've always been a big proponent of making sure startups have an easier way to work with the telco industry and telco ecosystem, and also encouraging the young people to get more into telecom. Now, how we do it, us by maybe doing a better branding, but also I've noticed, for example, when we were in the US and also US allies, the security of the communications network and the whole ecosystem has become a much bigger issue in the last few years, right? So, and as part of that, the governments are more interested in helping the communications industry get the kinds of resources it needs, whether it be by providing grants for things like Open RAN, but also helping with having people getting more into these kinds of sort of raising the exposure for these industries. So I think a combination of the intrinsic value of how exciting communications network is in itself, and it's not just digital, but it's physical, right? Like you have physics and analog and the that piece of it coming with the digital, this marriage of the two is super interesting on its own, but also the branding from the industry, and then the push from the government for much more secure and safe and communications industry, and then helping all that together hopefully will create a better pool of talent coming into telecom.
Yeah, and I think we want to go back to the security, reliability aspects specifically of AI later. But before we go there, I wanted to talk a little bit about the cultural aspects of it. So, and the cultural aspects affect everybody, new hires and existing people. And we already kind of sort of talked a little bit about it, but with things like AI, but not just AI, but in general, but with AI specifically, what we need to have, it's sort of it's a difference in culture, and the technology is often ahead of us because humans are kind of like, culture is very important for us, and it takes time to adapt to new things. So once you have a network that uses AI can be seen as a black box. We don't really understand what goes on in there. We need to basically give control. You need to have people with different backgrounds. It's more an IT type of approach that we didn't have before. So there's all sorts of cultural changes that we need to sort of bring in. And again, that goes back to the role of humans. It's not just getting a model to do whatever you want it to do, is to make sure that that model works within the organization, that people are willing, able, and they're welcoming the change. So what is that you're seeing in that respect, and what do you think that the challenges are?
Yeah, there are a few things to touch on, and this can spiral into a very long conversation. But I think first of all, there should be that excitement, that availability. Hey, look, I mean, this is not just about the hype, just about deploying AI because everybody talks about it. It's about, hey, look, we're really ready to adopt AI in a meaningful way, and we're willing to commit resources to do so. And that might mean our existing infrastructure, also people, and we're willing to upskill our people if needs be, and work closely with, let's say, external organizations who have more expertise in the area, and they're not there to basically, put their jobs at risk, but really to make their life easy. So the mindset is an important factor. The second one, I think, is to do with trust. So as you said rightfully, most of these models are black boxes, and people will say, well, why would I trust this thing to do what I'm expecting it to do, right? And I think there's a lot of work going on at the moment in terms of advancing explainability of neural networks. What basically, let's say, what makes a model come to a certain decision with, let's say, its classification. So what are the features of an input that lead to that decision, and how can you, say, hold the model accountable for a decision and go back and audit it if you want, because in the end, networking is becoming a little bit of a critical infrastructure. So let's say you run on top of a network, a fleet of autonomous cars that rely on connectivity. And at some point, there's not enough capacity allocated to that fleet of cars, and that leads to potential, nefarious consequences. So you will want to go back and see why that happened and make sure that it doesn't happen in the future, or even run a digital twin system ahead of time and make sure ahead of time that situations that are a little bit challenging will not happen, because you were able to test the model ahead of time. You understand how it thinks and how it reasons about a certain situation and so on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to add to that, so if the AI can be applied to various parts of the telecom business, but if you just look at the networking piece, which is the part that we're talking about, so there's kind of like at least 3 parts of this: the planning of the network, the building of the network, and running of the network. And from personal experience, I could tell you that the way your network is architected, you show me that network architecture and I'll show you the organizational architecture. So traditionally, these have been black boxes. So then what happens on the support side of this, the network operations also becomes this sort of siloed organizations with experts in various black boxes. Now, as we go to more of an open architecture, which helps with everything, cloud nativeness, AI, and so forth, then the organization by nature has to become open. And of course, there's that tension between what used to work and now going to something that is unknown. So that shift is always a little tenuous. But what I've seen from experience at Rakuten Symphony is that our customers then, let's say with build, when we bring that automation to build, and people are not comfortable with that, like end users are not comfortable, then there's a directive from the management that says, we are going to make this shift. Whether we like it or not, we are going to make this shift. So then people know that there is no going back to the old. So we are only moving forward. So then they kind of become more motivated to making that shift. And then with operational, I think, again, another customer used this very successfully, is instead of going and doing a trial with the folks that are already running the network, they brought in a brand new team that didn't have presumptions about how a network should be running and operating. They knew the network, but they weren't in the operations today. So they came in with an open mind saying, so how can we do this? So then the whole notion of automation and how it could be done was much more accepting to them. So I think the combination of these two, having management buy-in and commitment that this is going to happen, that we are moving towards AI and we are going to use them. And then also that will then lead everybody to pick up that commitment. And then also potentially at the beginning, especially bring in people with more of an open mindset, people who haven't worked in the old closed siloed way. And once the thing gets up and running and you develop that trust, as Paul was mentioning, then it's easier for the current operations people to pick it up.
Yeah, and I guess I should say, it's important to have all the commitment coming down from the top, and it's part of a strategy. And I guess it's like, what is that you're trying to do, and then have the infrastructure and the people to actually do it. So, and again, this goes back to the human element that, there's no amount of a good model that is going to solve the problem. You need to have a commitment. You need to have, well, not only the commitment, but the right infrastructure, the right organizational structure to support that.
Right.
So I see there's another 3 other questions, and 2 are sort of more general and not specific to the topic we're today. So I will put them, we can deal with it later, but there is one that is out about the difference between AI and automation. I think that we can sort of clear it out. Is the way I see it. So I'm writing a report on AI and automation, and the 2 go well together. However, you can have a lot of AI models that were used for purposes that are other than automation, and you can have automation without AI. So I see AI as a tool to do things, but it's not something, and which is, if we go and think about, for instance, things like monetization, AI does not necessarily help you get more revenues. It's just part of it. Your monetization strategy is something that might use AI or not, whatever. But in of itself, AI doesn't do anything really. It's only if you put it into something you want to do and you have targets and it's a tool. Is that the way you see it, or?
Yeah,
well, I see. Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
You go, Azita first.
I see sort of these gradients of automation all the way to a full autonomy. And it's kind of similar when looking at cars, right? So if you look at the different levels of self-driving, at the sort of the lower level of self-driving, like 1 and 2, we have this cruise control, right? So as cruise control, like there is a template for how you're supposed to be using that. Like you you move certain knobs and things, and you put it at a certain speed, and it goes at that level. So it's a template that's set. So but then after that, the speed is set at that, and then the car kind of runs on its own at that point. But then as you move forward, there's more and more autonomy that is introduced, and maybe you can summon the car and it comes on its own. Maybe it can park itself. And then you add the freeway driving, and then the street driving, and so on and so forth. So the automation at the beginning of that could happen without AI, could happen with sort of rule-based sort of way that we've had. But then as you go into more and more autonomy, you have to have AI and more sophisticated AIs playing a role there. So then if there's a slider between what a person can do and what an AI can do, the slider is kind of moving more towards AI and what that can do. And especially when it comes to making money, the monetization, besides just saving and productivity gains. When we talk about network slicing for 5G Advanced, I mean, network slicing really cannot be that effective without using AI models to spawn the new networks. It all has to be automated and without people in the loop, or like minimizing people in the loop there. Otherwise, it's not going to be that cost effective, and the enterprises will not pick it up. So just some thoughts on this notion of automation versus autonomy and AI.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that everything we do, this is going to be a gradual approach. You don't want to be, you're not going to have 100% automated, zero touch kind of ideal, fully automated, fully AI driven on day one. That would be a recipe for disaster. So, Paul, you were saying?
Yes, I mean, I think Azita already touched on a few things which I would have said. So, I mean, you can think about a very simple system where you don't just want to automate things. So, if you want, like, one of the simplest that comes to mind is, let's say you have a temperature sensor in your home, and you want your heating to kick in when the temperature drops below a threshold. No, so that's a very simple decision logic that allows you to automate. There's no AI at play there. Yeah, so you have an input, which is a time series data, and then you have a threshold, and then things exceed that threshold, you automate. That's easy. If you want to do more complex stuff, then you need AI. And I mean, I think the example of slicing is really, really good, because okay, you can slice a network and let it run. For instance, I mean, we've done that in the past, let's say with SD-WAN. No, you pre-configure virtualized networks and you use a virtual network for different applications. That's fine. Is that a cost-effective way of running a virtualized network? It isn't. So now if you're able to understand in real time what is the volume of traffic, let's say on an application by application basis, which you can't really do in real time at machine speed, only by humans, then you do add AI in the mix. You can close the loop or not. So say, okay, I just want to quantify, and in the end, provide that information to a logic or a person and all that kind of stuff, which doesn't actuate automation, but I could feed that AI into let's say, a network slicing support function, which will do everything for me based on those insights that the AI obtains in real time. So decision logic itself might be relatively simple, but that fulfills the automation part. Yeah. I don't know if there was anything else I wanted to add, but I think that covers quite a few things. So
now let's go back and so as I mentioned before, the issues of security and security, reliability. How do we trust a model? And clearly, and the more the networks are open, you have multiple vendors playing in, so security becomes a little bit different. It's always obviously fundamental, but different. So the question is that how do we test to make sure we're actually getting what we want from a model? So first of all, we need to know what we want, but then we need to test it. Is it reliable? Do we have to deal with the hallucinations? And digital twins are a way to possibly address, or in fact, there's a question to you: are digital twins a way to address those issues? Or how should we think about? Okay, we have a model, we've trained it. Is it doing what we want it to do? Can we trust it? Is it secure?
Okay, so I think there were a couple of questions, a few questions all in one. So like at one level, we are, the way you start this is by trialing and having a proof of concept, right? In doing that, let's say you have a pre-trained model and you fine tune it with the stuff that you want. And then you run it with, it's kind of like reinforced learning with human in the loop. So you run it with the humans and seeing if the information that it generates is the right information that you want. And then you take that data set and then, fine tune it a little more to make sure, and then you make, and going back to the notion of what kinds of people you need for AI to work, besides the AI domain experts and the network experts and the executives that decide what to do, you also need people that look at the sort of the guardrails, if you will, like, is this thing hallucinating or not? Or also, is it the biases that the data may have, and so forth. So you need those kinds of people along in this as well. But then you iterate on this. You make sure that once you think the model is got the right parameters and so forth, but you still run a few, not a few, but like various tests on it and evaluate it and make sure that you can tweak it in a way that works for your environment. And also with that, I would go back to this notion of augmenting the data with some sort of synthetic data as well. So let's say there are types of security the breaches that come in that only happens once in a blue moon and hopefully never happens. So you create those synthetic data and make sure that your AI system is able to handle that. And of course, security breaches keep changing, and then you keep updating the model as well. So I think those are some of the ways that you could work with this. But there is no question that there is this notion of AI for security, like you use AI to do anomaly detection, you do fraud detection, things like that, and that's great. But there's also a notion of security for AI, because now you have increased your attack vector, and you need to make sure that you're dealing with that as well.
Absolutely. And the same thing for testing. You have, you use AI for testing, but then you also have to test AI. It's kind of like
yeah, I mean, there's an important element. I mean, if I go back to data, right? So in the end, I think, we haven't gotten to a point where AI models actually learn abstract behaviors. They largely learn basically to reason about and the distribution of the input data they've been trained on. So when they put them in production for inference purposes, they will look at inputs, but the expectation is that those inputs will more or less fall within the same distribution as the data it's been trained on. So whenever you have variations outside that, that can lead to problems, and those problems can be, by accident, but it can also be deliberate. So if you go back to network slicing, so imagine you train the model to distinguish different types of traffic in an aggregate in a privacy preserving way, and depending on the application, you map them on a certain slice, and you monetize certain slices in a certain way. So now you have a malicious actor that says, well, actually, I will try to manipulate the features of my traffic so that it is mapped to a premium slice, and I don't pay for it. So that's kind of adversarial machine learning, and there's a lot of work on that. And then the question is, how do you, prevent that from happening? And some of that actually doesn't necessarily involve AI itself, but probably you need to do a first step pre-processing to eliminate all that sort of noise, if you want, adversarial manipulation, and then provide a sort of a sanitized input to your model so that you can guarantee that it continues to do what it was meant to do. But it's, yeah, so adversarial ML, it's itself like it's a new avenue for research for many people. And most people, maybe you know this from like the imaging community, where you say you add some noise to a picture of a cat, and then to a human it still looks like a cat, but to AI now it would say, well, this is a castle. So it's obviously completely different, yeah. And this can be, it can have consequences in real life. Let's say you see kids putting stickers on traffic signs. So all of a sudden, the self-driving car doesn't think it's a stop sign, but thinks it's something else and keeps driving. And then you can extrapolate to networking, where people basically will manipulate the traffic that they generate or their applications generate to be treated in a certain way, or to even mask a cybersecurity attack, for example.
Yeah, and I guess both of you are pointing out to the fact that data is not just data. I mean, we need to understand how to treat it and treat it differently as synthetic data, or this kind of like other data. So sorry, Azita,
also the input, yeah, and the one thing that Paul mentioned, I just wanted to emphasize for a second. The input that comes in needs to be sanitized, because sometimes you might not even see it, right? Like it's square, a white square, but there may be text in there in white that we don't see it, but the AI system sees it. And so being able to sanitize the input as it comes in before it gets to that. Yeah.
Now we're at the top of the hour, but I wanted to ask a very quick fire question to leave our audience with a final wisdom bits from you guys. What do you think is the biggest challenge for humans to make AI succeed? Or the biggest opportunity, whatever. What is the biggest?
I think,
go ahead, Azita.
Yeah, for me, the biggest opportunity is to look at AI as a very powerful tool, and it's coming and it's here, and the AI agents is like the next exciting area to look into. So you could think of it as you getting this very intelligent workforce for a very relatively low cost, and you have to be on top of the developments in that area and make sure that you do not miss out on this. So I would have a big FOMO on this, making sure you definitely keep on top of AI developments.
Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of have some thoughts along similar lines. So I think it's not a question of when I think this will happen. I think it's almost like any operator that wants to sort of manage a network in a cost-effective way and wants to remain relevant will have to adopt AI. I mean, we're already starting to see hyperscalers moving into the telco space. I think there was an announcement today that AWS is moving into private 5G in Europe. So that means that, the incumbents might be threatened by more agile companies that are much more quicker to innovate. So yeah, it's all about adoption and being open-minded and willing to try new paradigms to remain relevant.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that the openness is kind of like at the basis of it, and it's a huge opportunity, but we need to make sure, again, we understand it and go along. Azita, Paul, we're at the top of the hour, so thank you so much for taking part into this Sparring Partners.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica and Paul. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, and I enjoyed it too, and I hope you guys in the audience as well. Thanks for the questions. And we will have the Sparring Partners video and then the transcript available soon. And there is an upcoming Sparring Partners on the decomposable AI landscape. And this is with Viavi. So I hope you'll be able to join that. It's on May 22nd. And so thank you so much for your participation. Bye-bye.